Here's another quick answer to a challenge to Christianity, and that involves whether we can believe that the New Testament Gospels are actually eyewitness accounts. That's being challenged a lot these days. So where do we go with this? How would we take this on? Well, real quickly, and again, you can find more information on my website in more detail. But let's start with creeds. There are these little nuggets that are buried inside Paul's letters. For example, 1 Corinthians 15, that tell us that Paul is taking some information that he gathered and passing it along to the people that he's talking to. And they're all over in Philippians and Galatians and Colossians. And people are dating these. They're very interested in them now, scholars. They're dating them back within a couple of years at the time of Jesus. And these creeds echo exactly what the New Testament has said in the Gospel. So they reinforce the Gospel statements. The Gospels are probably at least in the 40s, maybe 50s, 60s AD. Jesus is 30 AD. But these creeds may be in the 30s as well. And they say the same thing. So that's a reflection that these had to go back to eyewitness times. Secondly, if you look in the letters that John wrote and Peter wrote, they claimed that they were eyewitness reporting. In fact, I think it's 1 John. He says, in a sense, he's saying, I'm swearing this under oath. And he gives the same language that they use in first century legal situations to swear into a courtroom situation that he was telling the truth. How about the church fathers? So we have people that were sitting under the disciples and the second generation and all. Every one of them said, these come from the first century. They're definitely eyewitness accounts. That's why certain books were chosen. Why do we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Because the early people that sat down and said, these are the authentic books we want to read, they knew they were from the eyewitness accounts of the first century and said, we stamp these are the ones we want, and that's what the people of the congregations agreed to. Here's another way you can look at it. If they weren't written in the first century, how did they get the archaeology so right? Because remember, Jerusalem is destroyed in 70 AD. So anything that you know about Jerusalem, for example, 5 colonnades that John talks about around the Pool of Bethesda. How do you know there are 5 colonnades? If he's writing this, well, not he, but somebody's just making this up 300 or 400 years later and pretending to be first century reporting, they wouldn't know that. How about Luke? He's considered one of the most powerfully accurate historians. He got things right as far as political terms for the people in power in different cities. He knew how the sailing went. He knew the way the winds blew. All sorts of things that would be first century eyewitness reporting. Then there's something called a chain of custody, which is kind of interesting. If you take a look at the church fathers, one received a message from somebody who received that message from somebody, and each time they report exactly what they got from the person who told them. And if you take it back, it goes right back to John, or it goes back to Peter, or it goes back to Paul. It goes back to first century. So these stories do not change over time. There's a powerful book you might want to take a look at sometime, or maybe just find a rehash of it because it's pretty thick and tough going in spots. It's called Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. And it talks about some of these things we were talking about here. The other one is Cold Case Christianity by J. Warner Wallace. Covers a lot of these same issues.